The November 3rd, 2022 meeting of the Corvallis School Board is called to order at 6:30 p.m. In the interest of public health and safety for all community members, especially for immunocompromised individuals and their families, the Corvallis School Board will continue to offer a virtual option for board member and district personnel participation. Additionally, public comment is available at some meetings, including this meeting, both in person and virtually. Information about how to provide public comment is available on the Corvallis School District website. The board agenda and packet, as well as the link to the district YouTube channel, are available on the school board page on the district website. Public meetings are live streamed on the district's YouTube channel, and a recording is posted to the same channel, typically the day after the meeting. I'm grateful that this technology makes it possible for more community members to view and participate in school board meetings, given the flexibility provided by Oregon law. Tonight we have Directors Baker, Adams, El-Abdraba, Jones, myself, Director Finger McDonald, and Director Tomany present in person, and Director Whitebear is excused. Due to, well, we don't have any other board members online, so we don't have to worry about connectivity limitations for board members. So this evening, the first item on our agenda is acknowledgement of Native American Heritage Month. The board passed a resolution to acknowledge this month previously, and we will read that resolution tonight. November is the month, so it started on the 1st, a couple of days ago, but it's an important recognition. So this is the resolution.
Corvallis School District 509J, Acknowledgement of Native American Heritage Month, Resolution Number 21-1003. Whereas the Corvallis School District recognizes and pays tribute to the significant contributions made in our community by Native American people, which includes Native Indians, Alaskan Natives, and Native Hawaiians, as well as Indigenous people from Canada, Mexico, Central America, South America, and the broader Pacific Islands. And whereas the Corvallis School District affirms that Native American students, families, staff, and community members should be valued for all aspects of their identities. And whereas Native American Heritage Month grew out of efforts began by Dr. Arthur C. Parker of the Seneca Nation's work with the Boy Scouts of America in adopting American Indian Day in 1912, and
whereas Reverend Sherman Coolidge of the Arapaho Nation and then President of the Congress of the American Indian Association first proclaimed American Indian Day on September 28, 1915, then calling on the nation to observe this day. And whereas Red Fox James of the Blackfoot Nation traveled across the country on horseback to gain endorsements of 24 states' governments to hold a day to honor Native American nationally before presenting it to the White House on December 14, 1915. And whereas American Indian Day was first declared May 1916 in the state of New York, and whereas Native American Awareness Week was first proclaimed nationally in 1976, and whereas what was then called National American Indian Heritage Month was first proclaimed nationally in 1990.
And whereas the Kalapuya people have called the Corvallis area and Willamette Valley home since the time immemorial, and whereas the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians continue to maintain their ancestral and cultural connections to the Corvallis area and broader Willamette Valley, and whereas there are countless cultural heritages represented by Native American peoples, and whereas the state of Oregon has a documented history of anti-Indigenous actions based on colonization, which includes genocide, forced removals, deprivation, broken treaties, and the outlaw of Native American cultural practices.
Whereas education has been misused as a tool of colonization in Oregon, serving to sever Native American children from their families, languages, and cultural heritages through boarding residential schools, beginning with the Indian Training School at Forest Grove, which later moved and became the Chemawa Indian School in Salem, and whereas Native American Heritage Month provides an opportunity to continue the district's growth in learning about the many contributions of Native American people to the nation, world, and local community, and whereas education is a necessary component for creating a more equitable and anti-racist community, nation, and world, and whereas the Corvallis School District has made a commitment to equity and anti-racism, and whereas the Corvallis School District has a responsibility to honor and respect the diverse histories of our community, and
whereas the Corvallis School District believes each and every student must be celebrated and appreciated for the distinct and vibrant contributions made by sharing cultures, language, ideas, beliefs, and values within a school community. Therefore, let it be resolved by the Board of Education of the Corvallis School District does hereby proclaim November 2022, as well as each November annually as Native American Heritage Month in the district, and strongly encourages students, families, staff, and community members to join in existing local celebrations, and encourages all students in the district to help highlight this month in great appropriate ways, as well as highlight the contributions of Native American peoples to the local community, nation, and beyond, both historically and in current times, adopted by the Board of Directors in School District Number 509J, Corvallis of Benton and Lynn Counties, Oregon, at its regular meeting on the 21st day of October in 2021, signed by the Board Chair and Superintendent at the time. Thank you.
thank you. So the next item on our agenda is action on matters discussed in executive session. As you know, we are not at liberty to discuss anything that took place in executive session. You received sample wording for the two options available to the board under separate cover. If you plan to propose wording other than that provided, please write out your motion in its entirety before reading it aloud. Does anyone wish to make a motion? Sammy.
Madam Chair, I move to elect not to hold a hearing, I move to not hold a hearing on Mr. Schaefer's complaint and instead defer to the findings of the Assistant Superintendent.
I second the motion.
So it's been moved and seconded that we defer the decision to the finding of the Assistant Superintendent. Is there any discussion about the motion? Yeah. So, Director Baker?
I vote aye.
Director Adams?
Aye.
Director Alabrava?
Aye.
Director Jones?
Aye.
Director Tomei?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Passes unanimously. So next we have board member reports. Does anyone have anything they wish to report? Sammy?
Well, I have two reports, Madam Chair, with the committees and involvements with OSBA and SBA. The first one is with the Constitution and Bylaws Committee at NSBA. I was appointed to that committee for the unfulfilled term for the member that I filled their term. And one of the things I'm really excited about with National School Board Association is that they're looking hard at the bylaws and the Constitution. And one of the work that we have done and will be proposed for the General Assembly for the school boards is an amendment for the bylaws, and specifically with the purpose statement to make it more concise, focus on the kids and supporting local school boards to do the work. So I look forward to share more updates on that as it comes closer to that date. Also on OSBA, last week I went to two meetings, which were the final week of the legislative roadshow in Southern Oregon ESD for Jackson, Josephine, Klamath counties, and also Douglas County. And the themes will be shared with the OSBA board, and I'll be happy to report it as well with our board about what we learned. One of the two important questions that were raised is how the kids are doing and how is the schools. And almost consensus, everybody is excited that the school is starting back to normal in their school districts, and they're feeling a sigh of relief that this is a more normal year than the last 2 years. The other prompt was related to board member training. There's consensus that board member training is required across the state. However, there's really strong feelings about having that mandated and how it is mandated. I would reflect on our experience, how we trained ourselves and how we chose what we want to be trained on. I think it is a role model that deserves to be shared. So as we come closer to the legislative session, I would encourage us to celebrate our experience and share it. So rather than the legislator mandate how and what the training should be, maybe adopt a flexible model similar to ours.
Thank you. Anyone else with anything to report? No. That will move on to our superintendent's report.
I just have a few things I wanted to highlight for the board and for the community. The first is that at our next board meeting, which is November 17th, that will be our first opportunity to meet with principals to talk about their school improvement plans. Over the last couple of years, that's looked different due to COVID and keeping social distancing in mind. And so the plan is that we'll meet here. Each principal will have the opportunity to meet with you with another member of district leadership to have conversations about their school improvement plan. And so I'd encourage you, before you come that evening, to have a chance to review those plans. They'll be online the Friday prior. And so, again, because some of you are new to the process, and all of us haven't done it that way for a few years, just going back to a process we've done in the past. There's been years when we've come together and all elementary principals have shared one plan, secondary, middle schools shared a plan, high school shared a plan, but this year they're going to be looking at their own data, having conversations with you about what their plans are moving forward. So just wanted people to have that context before you come into the meeting on the 17th. So again, more than anything, that's a reminder. Also, our communication audit. I wanted to provide an update around that. So over the last couple of days, we've had a member of the team coming and having conversations with school board members, community members, parents, students, and also an opportunity for them to meet with Kelly and myself to start to share some of the findings and themes that came up. They'll be providing us with a report in the future, and we'll be sharing that information with all of you. Again, the intention was how can we better communicate what's happening in the district with our community, what channels make the most sense, what sorts of information are we providing that's reaching people, and what areas can we improve upon. Also, in terms of the survey results, so we had over 900 families complete a survey in this process, over 300 staff, and over 100 community members. And so that information will also be embedded with those focus groups as recommendations come forward for us, again, to better communicate with students, staff, and the community. So anyhow, look for that. And again, thank you to Kelly and her team for making it happen. There was lots of coordination happening the last couple of days. Again, making sure that we were able to get the voices in the room. On the similar note, our board engagement sessions have been scheduled. So as we've talked about before, those are to look at the board goals, get feedback that we'll bring forward to you as you look at renewing, reviewing, revising the board goals that you currently have set. And so some of the groups that will be met with are our diversity, equity, and inclusion group, which is made up of parents, students, and staff, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later tonight. Our SAFE students, our students advocating for equity, and there are some PRIDE students also included in that group. Our Special Education Advisory Committee on December 14th, both in English and in Spanish. And then we're going to have 3 community forums. We're going to have one on November 30th at Letitia Carson, December 13th at our district office, and then January 10th at Catherine Jones Harrison Elementary. And so, again, a report to you. I know that I'm only working about 50% of the time. So I'm sorry if there's people who can't hear me very well. Jonna, did you have a question? Okay, go ahead.
So I just had a question about that. You just rattled off a number of dates and
Yep.
times. Where can the community go to find out about sessions that might be open to folks to attend? Or are there sessions that are open for community members, staff, students to come and attend? And how can they find out?
Yeah, so we'll be sharing that information with the community. Again, the dates we just finalized yesterday. The first community forum would be November 30th, and so we'll be sending out information ahead of that. Yep. Other questions? Okay. One other thing a couple other things. Sorry, everybody. I'm moving my head because I want to talk to everyone, and when I do that, I'm losing it. All right, we'll try it this way. So recently, our at a glance, I'm going to look forward. I'm sorry. I really want to engage you, but it's not working that way.
We can see you.
Okay, so I'll look at myself. Sorry about that. So recently, our district report cards by school came out, those at-a-glance reports, and there's a couple things I wanted to highlight in those. Later on tonight, I'm going to talk about our district improvement plan in my report, but a couple things that really stood out to me on the positive side. One was the increase in ninth graders on track last year compared to the year before. So again, as we think about coming out of the pandemic and helping students to be successful, our ninth graders earning 6 credits was much higher than the year prior. The other thing I thought was really important for us to recognize was the number of students going on to higher education. So 81% of students from CV and 76% from CHS enrolled in a 2-year or 4-year college or university for this fall. And I think that says a lot about students who had the challenges of going through the pandemic and needing to be resilient and needing to continue to pursue and higher education. And I think those numbers are really tell a story that I don't want us to forget about as we continue to talk about data and the work that needs to happen as we come out of the pandemic, because those are stories of students who have gone through that and continue to persevere. And so I thought those were a couple of pieces from that report that I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to be thinking about as we continue to think about our board goals, where we go in the future. I think that's an important story to tell. Another topic that I wanted to make sure that you were all aware of is that the student information system that we've been using for a number of years has come through our Education Service District, our ESD, and next year we're going to be transitioning to Synergy, a new student information system. The reason that we're doing that is because the system that we've used with the ESD over a number of years has required ongoing support. Synergy is a much larger student information system. About half the state uses it. And so we're going to be going through some transitions that you'll start to see as you register students for school next year. And staff will be receiving professional development and training around because it includes everything from our scheduling system to our gradebook system to all of the student information that we hold on to so we can communicate with families. So it's a pretty big shift for us. And so I just want you to know about it early because there'll be things that I'll be sharing with you throughout the summer and into the fall related to that transition. And again, I just want it to be on your radar early. 2 more topics. One is I looked at my phone today and I looked at the weather for next week and I saw what I hate to say was a snowflake. So we are at that point of the year where we have to start to talk about inclement weather and anticipate that. So just as a reminder to the board and to the community, we try to make those decisions as early as possible by 5:30 in the morning. Sometimes as I'm driving around at 5:30, I find that it starts to snow harder at 6 a.m. or sometimes it stops at 6 a.m., but we've had to make the decision by 5:30 because of our buses. Also keeping in mind that once we're in school, we try to stay in school rather than have families come and pick up their kids midday or students try to drive home midday. So that's a consideration for us as well. And one of the things I'm always thinking about is students that are waiting for buses or high schoolers that are driving to school. Primarily the hill out to Crescent Valley is the area that I drive as I'm trying to make a decision. The decisions are never easy, but I do the best I can. And I just want people to know that those are the things we're anticipating and planning around. The final piece is that for busing, sometimes bus routes get modified to snow routes, and we can communicate those things with families. But again, because it has been such a beautiful fall, and everything changed this week, really, I just want it to be on people to be thinking about that and preparing for that. And then the final thing is I wanted to share the district hiring and that process. We are in the process of reviewing as positions get posted, more thorough way historically. And the reason why we're looking at the positions that are being posted is because we're thinking about the next biennium. We're starting to think about what sorts of funding we'll have in the next 2 years as a school district. Dollars start to decline coming out of the pandemic. See fewer kindergartners coming, more 9th through 12th graders leaving. We also are thinking about how we make sure that we have the resources we need. And so as we're at positions, we're being really thorough, looking at our positions elsewhere that we could make transitions between buildings. We're looking at the source of funding. Is it long lasting? Is it short term? And so we're making all of those decisions on Monday morning based on input from principals for the upcoming week. And so again, nothing that I think we need to worry about at this point in time, but something I want people to be aware of because of what we anticipate, and also moving into a legislative session. I want you to be aware of the concerns we have and the advocacy that we'll need to do as we think about the biennial budget. Any questions for me?
Can I go first? So I was thinking about the numbers we have about what students do after they graduate. And I know that number only captures students who are enrolling in 2-year and 4-year schools. Do we have any way of tracking our students who are entering trade schools or the military, or so students who have a plan and are moving forward with their lives in a positive way, but aren't being captured in the higher education number?
So the tools that we have are the clearinghouse, which gives us information about where students go, and also if they stay on for another year. We don't have as much information on those other groups of students that's available in a way that they're able to be tracked and give us that information over time. So one of the things we always look at, and I think a lot about with that question, is our students that are concentrators or students who have at least taken a half credit of a CTE course, and the percentage of those students who graduate in 4 years, so they're prepared for the industries that they're going into. But in terms of the ability to track over time, that's more challenging for us.
Well, thank you, Ryan, for the updates. I want to just briefly touch on, in 2021, one campaign promise of mine was gone are the snow days, so it's really unfortunate that I could not hold that.
We haven't called one yet.
But it's coming. So the question I have is related to the student information system. I trust this is an operational issue, and we're going to a system that will provide better services for what we need. But 2 questions on my mind is, our partnership with the ESD on registration have provided very fruitful and a really great role model on capturing race and ethnicity at the level that the community asks for. So are we going to be able to capture that? And the second question, compliance with the gender identity requirements, gender identity policy requirements that we have.
Those are both pieces we're working with the ESD around to be able to anticipate and plan for. And so that's a process that's in process right now in those conversations with Synergy.
So Ryan, in one of the statistics you shared around high school or continuing education rates, you shared Corvallis High School and Crescent Valley High School. And I know we have student reps tonight from 3 high schools. And I'm just curious about, for students at College Hill or going through the College Hill program, are they reflected in their connecting schools? Is there a way in the future that we can also call out? I know that that's always a continual, both a challenge and a question around the College Hill identity and how important that is for students too.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking me that question. So when we look at our data, we're always including our College Hill students in their home high school. The reason why we have done that historically has been that it maintains that connection. Students often walk both with College Hill and their home high school the next day. It also maintains that responsibility for the home high schools around for students who've moved to or transitioned. Other districts of similar size that are near us have their own school, alternative high school, and that doesn't really tell the whole story that you're able to tell as if you're thinking about graduation rates for all students that are connected with that high school. But I think it's a great point that you're bringing up.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
So next we have our reports from our student representatives. So let me just start with, we have the Crescent Valley students first, and then we'll just move along the table. So.
Okay, that sounds great. So I'm just going to talk about sports first. And so right now, the fall sports seasons are coming to an end while the winter ones are beginning to kick off. And some highlights from our fall sports. So volleyball is actually continuing to the quarterfinals of the state championship, which is super cool, as well as the girls soccer team. And the boys cross country team got second in districts and are preparing to run this Saturday for state. And the girls soccer team got first in districts and is planning to also run this Saturday for state. And the boys soccer team ended their season this week ranked 14th in the state.
Okay, so for our school report, the first quarter is almost done and students are settling into clubs, sports, and classwork. Seniors are working hard to finish college applications, and pretty soon we're gonna have Cultural Food Day this month, where students and families bring food from the culture and give it like everybody shares and everybody can try some. And Powder Puff is gonna start pretty soon, which is class competition for flag football and cheerleading. And this week's Tuesday, we had Ryan Noss come to our core council meeting, and the biggest discussion was Samantha's proposal for gender-neutral bathrooms. And we were just talking about which pair of bathrooms in the school should get converted first, because we can do one thing at a time. And it was between the one in the senior hall and the one in the F building. And we also talked about next year possibly making student IDs with hall passes, so it's also easier for students to get to the gender-neutral bathrooms. And in general, just it's easier to access the building because we have a weird campus. And also restocking period products in the bathrooms as well as the gender-neutral bathrooms that we have right now. So yeah.
All right, okay, so to start, we'll talk about our dances at Corvallis High School. We had our homecoming not too long ago, and it was a big success. Even though the football game didn't have the best result, we had a really fun time at the dance. We had more students participate than we expected, and we're having a lot of increased freshman participation this year with dressing up for Spirit Weeks and just attending events in general. And then we are planning a winter formal on December 3rd, I believe, and it's going to be combined with CV, so we're working together with their leadership class, and our sophomore class presidents are taking a big lead with that, and creating a winter formal committee, and they're just preparing it for us. And we also have our flag football program. Some of you may know it as Powder Puff in the past, but we have changed the name so it's a little bit less derogatory. And we've also changed the rules, so it's a safer game and a more positive environment. We almost weren't able to do it this year due to lots of reports on bullying and lots of injuries. And practices have started this week, and we're going to have our big day of games on November 11th next week. And then I'm going to pass it to Emily to finish our report.
Okay, talking about a few upcoming events next week and the week following. We have a fall sports banquet on next Tuesday on November 9th, which will honor all the fall sports teams. Unfortunately, our boys soccer team, got knocked out of their first round in the playoffs, but they fought hard, especially traveling all the way that they did and playing in the snow. Yeah. And then the week following, on November 18th, we have a Red Cross blood drive, which usually happens like twice a year, but we're very excited, and the leadership class is working hard on getting that done.
To start off, all College Hill students who are caught up with their work are invited to participate in incentive field trips. So far this year, we have taken students to Mary's Peak, South Beach, Silver Creek Falls, and we will be bowling at OSU next week. It is so much fun to celebrate good work and to get kids out in nature to explore our beautiful country and to build space for kids to connect, to play, and to learn from one another. For our construction program, this is our second year in, and year one, students have mastered basic woodworking, metalworking, and auto and drafting concepts. Now in year two, they have built a new ramp in their classroom and are set to begin design and construction of their micro shelters that will be donated to the Unity Shelter to provide housing to people in our community who are in need. It is exciting to see this group of students build community skills and hope for their futures. For academy courses, some highlights this year, in book club, Ann Foltz is collaborating with Marie Lejeune. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. She's from Western Oregon University to find young adult fiction that is both challenging and high interest for our students. Together, the group reads works that include characters from diverse backgrounds that are written by so many different types of authors and who celebrate the strength and wisdom for all sorts of people. It is great to see kids themselves in literature to learn to love reading and to reflect on their own stories, or stories of people who look and feel like themselves. In history films, students are exploring topics like the nature of freedom, the meaning of dignity, and the power of courage as they view historical films and wrestle with difficult conversations together. Just Mercy has been a favorite, and we highly recommend it if you have not seen the film. This course is pretty inspirational, and I really like it, and I am in that class right now. There's also basketball and frisbee and like soccer. They're not actually like real sports though, like we don't play with different teams like CV or CHS, but we still like play with the community of College Hill. We have been challenged in our own new locations this year. There's no internal doors or walls, and it's proven to be difficult at times, but our staff and students have shown themselves to be resilient and devoted to success. We're a little bit worried about the urban farm kids who are still doing class outside, but their classrooms should be ready soon. We hopefully look forward to our new building in the fall, but we're not sure if that is the case or not. That's it. It starts in the beginning of school and ends at 1:30. On Wednesdays at College Hill, we end school at 1:30. so it's a little different than normal school, but so it's at beginning to 1:30. It's really nice. It's like every 2 weeks, I believe, and it's for students who are caught up in their work.
I'm just trying to think about if there's a day that I can go along. So I was trying to plan around the time.
I mean, since we are right next door to you guys,
I know.
you're more than welcome to.
I think that should be reserved for board members who are caught up on their work. We should get to go.
They have to worry about a quorum.
Uh-oh.
Thanks.
All 6 of us.
Yeah, I just want to thank them for the update and just touch on something that CHS shared and Lucy touched on briefly. We hear about bullying a lot within our community and other communities, so your voice around how we can address it systemically would be really appreciated. And we do have policy that doesn't tolerate it and works toward eliminating it, but your ideas would be very appreciated. So please reach out to counselors, teachers, and maybe look our policies and suggest if there's any ideas we can do to address it. But thank you for sharing that.
And following on that, I want to commend the students for finding a way to be able to have your event and have fun in a way that is inclusive and works for everyone and people can feel good about. So, that's an example for all of us. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment. So I will now open the public hearing testimony. The complete guidelines for public comment are available in the registration table at the back of the gym on the board's website. I will share a few important points now. When it's your turn to speak, please come forward and have a seat, state your name, and direct your comments to the board. Speakers may offer objective criticism to district operations and programs, but the board will not hear complaints concerning individual district personnel. As a reminder, you will have 3 minutes to make your comments. The yellow light will turn on when you have 30 seconds left, and the red light will turn on when your time is up. Following your comments, the board will have 3 minutes to ask clarifying questions. Before you start your comment, please state your name for the record and state whether you reside within the school district boundary.
Okay, all right. Okay. All right, well, I'm here tonight on behalf of all parents in our community, and I wish the board to acknowledge November as Parents' Rights in Education Month. You may ask, why November? Well, in November 2005, the 9th Circuit stole parents' rights. Presiding over Oregon and 9 other states, the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals found in Fields versus Palmdale School District that the Meyer-Pierce right, which is the right of parents to direct their upbringing of their children, does not exist beyond the threshold of the school door. The court stated, "We conclude that parents are possessed of no constitutional right to prevent the public schools from providing information on the subject of sexuality to their children in any form or manner they select. These efforts compromise the inalienable rights of parents to raise their children with the value system they choose and are contrary to the spirit of the local public school district mandating that parents' rights do exist." And I will read the proclamation now. It says, "In recognition of the vital importance of education excellence and meaningful collaboration between the Corvallis School District and families, we recognize November as Parents' Rights in Education Month. Whereas, we acknowledge parents are the child's first and foremost educator, and have the primary responsibility for the education, care, and training of their children. And whereas education is comprised of a range of activities by which families and communities teach knowledge and skills, including ethical and behavioral norms and traditions, and whereas fairness and equality must be afforded to all students and family in the school district, and whereas public schools need cooperation and support of all parents, and whereas the parent-child relationship shall be honored and supported by teachers, counselors, administrators, and school board members. Therefore, we declare November Parents' Rights in Education Month, affirming the constitutional right of parents to direct the education and upbringing of their children. 2022 has been a year full of uncertainty and unprecedented changes in every aspect of life, especially K-12 education. Parents and guardians of school-aged children need reassurance from you personally that their parent-child relationship is crucial to the child's success in school. Regarding disallowing unvaccinated parents from volunteering in the classroom, your intention may have been to maintain the ORS laws and statutes set forth by ODE, but the
Ms.
impact—
Larkham, I'm sorry, your time has expired.
Okay. I'll just say, we're asking in good faith that you would adopt this declaration to just recognize that parents' rights are important, and I appreciate your time tonight. That it couldn't be on the agenda tonight. Yes, I got that. Thank you.
The process is there, so,
Okay.
yeah, so thank you for coming.
And maybe you could add it for next month as a discussion.
It needs to go, just to be clear, to get on an agenda, it has to be proposed by a board member. So you're welcome to work with a board member to do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have questions?
Yes.
The board members have questions.
So I have a couple quick questions. Thanks for coming.
Yes.
And the first one is, have you seen the email or the updates from the superintendents regarding allowing volunteers, processing
Yes.
volunteers exemptions?
Yes, and I'm thankful that there is a resolution. However, it's a shame that we've lost, Becky's
Thank you.
student, or her child has lost 2 months without her being able to help in the classroom, and that's a shame.
So thank you for answering the question. The
Yes.
other question I have, I'm just a little bit confused when you mentioned constitutional rights, and
Yes.
I'm curious where in the Constitution or Supreme Court ruling that you're referring to. As you
Yeah,
refer to the
I'm talking
constitutional
about the
rights.
FERPA laws, the family planning, family laws that protect family rights. So the FERPA laws.
FERPA laws. Thank you
Yes.
so much. Thanks
Yes.
for-
Thank you.
I think we have one more question.
And then I was just going to urge you to share your comments. We saw your email that came to the board.
Oh, okay,
But
thank
you have
you.
additional comments there. Go ahead and send those to the board because you
Oh,
weren't
okay.
able to finish your comments.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I
I'm
think we're
so
good.
quick
Thank
to
you.
leave. Sorry, is that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hello again. First of all, I want to let you know that I am very grateful that I will now be able to volunteer in my children's schools. The recent change of allowing exempted volunteers was music to my ears, so thank you. You are elected officials, and part of your duty is representing all the community and not just people who you agree with. This includes the parents of the children of the Corvallis School District. I have felt, for the most part, in the dark and excluded since last October when the proposed vaccine mandates for our children came out. I had asked you all to notify the district parents about the mandates via email or automated phone call, and I was basically ignored, so I felt that that was not appropriate. And then it continued last spring when I originally asked about exemptions for volunteers in schools and was told there would be no consideration. We birthed these children. Parents are our children's first teachers and deserve respect and the same inclusivity that you tell us is important for the children of the Corvallis School District. And I can kind of see it here, like there's administrators and there's the children, but where's the parent involvement? Parents' rights in education means we are part of the same team, a unified front and looking out for the best interest of the children of this district. It has felt like we are on opposite teams for too long. We are all part of the same community and all want what is best for our children. Right now, I'm asking you all to seriously reevaluate and reconsider the way that you have been doing things. I believe that together we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have a question?
Madam Chair, could the member state their name and whether
Oh, yeah.
they live in the district for
Sorry.
the record?
Becky Dubersich, and yes, in district. Thank you.
I do have a question, actually.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing. So you mentioned the composition of the table, and I questioned about where parents were. I'm just curious, do you have a suggestion of what it would look like for you, or what you mean by the comment, where are the parents?
Maybe just having some parents on this team. It's just an idea.
We do have a few parents, but one way that you, as a parent, can serve, of course, is to come and be on the board, which is it's an open seat, right? So that's how we all got here.
Yes.
And I think parents make fantastic board members. And so if you have some interest in serving,
I've thought about it.
yeah, but there will be an election soon, and so pay attention to when that comes out, and then throw your hat in the ring and maybe come and join.
Okay.
And that's for other parents too. I mean, if that's an interest or a way that you feel like you can serve the community and your children, then that is a great way to do it.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
Okay, thank you. So the public comment. Closed. So Sarah, is your mic? Yes, it is off. So the next section of the meeting is public testimony on the Student Investment Account Annual Report. So I will now open the public hearing for testimony on the Student Investment Account Annual Report. The complete guidelines for public comment are available on the registration. Do we need to read this whole section again? Did you all just hear what I said about public comment? So we won't go through that again. So who do we have?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and all of the board members for the opportunity to comment this evening on the district's Student Investment Account Report. My name is Sarah Lynch. I'm a resident of Corvallis, a graduate of Crescent Valley. Hey, Zoe. Hey, Charlotte. Hey, Shauna. And the mother of a child attending Corvallis Public Schools. I'm also the volunteer parent chair of the district's Special Education Advisory Committee, or SEAC. It was heartening to see in the report the district's efforts to listen to students and families to inform improvement, and included in those efforts is the addition of the bilingual bicultural special education navigators and the hiring of a bilingual special education teacher. Yet the report's description of how these changes came about is missing the most important voices and change agents that made this possible. I told you this would happen. A group of Spanish-speaking mothers, organized by a woman named Catalina Contreras, collectively identified the cultural and linguistic barriers they face in special education, and they identified the ways the district could break down the barriers. This group of extraordinary women came to SEAC to advocate to the board after they had encountered more barriers for their voices being heard by district staff. What's missing in the report, I want to speak into this space here. This should not be a story about SEAC and district administrators making these positions possible. This is a story of the leadership of those mothers and Catalina, their work elevating the needs of so many families like theirs, and their refusal to take no for an answer. So as you commit to being better listeners, I hope you are also reflecting on how the voices of families on the margins have been ignored, minimized, managed, talked over, averaged out, or in this case, erased from the record. And this question points toward more than a lack of technical channels to gather qualitative data, but also the mindsets, the behaviors, and the cultural norms that prevent their voices from being heard. I've been reflecting on how I contributed to this story being recentered on SEAC and the letter we submitted to the board last February. And I'm also reflecting on why it took a letter from SEAC, written in my policy wonk voice with educational jargon and academic citations, to make these issues visible and actionable by district leadership. So SEAC looks forward to being a partner in your work, listening at the margins, and will be a critical friend when you fall short on this commitment. So here I am, as a critical friend, honoring the voices, insights, and wisdom of the Latina women who are leading this call for change. And I hope you'll look to their wisdom as you continue to address the cultural, linguistic, and systemic barriers within special education.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions?
Okay.
All right, good evening, everyone. So my name is Denise Hughes Taffen. I live in Corvallis. I have 2 children who attend schools in Corvallis, one at Linus Pauling and the other one at CHS, yay. So I am really appreciative of this opportunity to make comments here this evening. So it was really good to read the student investment account report, which really speaks of the accomplishments of the school district, especially during these unprecedented times. I was very excited to read of the intention of the district to slow down and listen. My comments tonight addresses specifically what has been reported regarding the hiring of bilingual special education navigators at the elementary level. To read it, it feels like this was such a smooth process that resulted in a powerful change. What distresses me about this reporting are the voices that have been left out. It is disappointing that in an effort to showcase the accomplishments of the school district, that it was done in such a way that it erased voices. There are stories untold here. The few lines in this report does not capture the people who were at the forefront. This is not fully my story to tell, as I was only a witness and played a small part. What I can, however, say is that there was a group of BIPOC parents from our Spanish-speaking community who came up with this idea. They approached the school district and received a lot of pushback, but this did not stop them. After trying to speak to several people at the school district level, they then approached the Special Ed Advisory Committee. Together with SEAC and some other BIPOC parents, the district was again contacted. After several conversations, we later found out that the district was going to hire bilingual special education navigators. It was a very bumpy process. There still remains many unanswered questions and concerns as it relates to hiring these navigators, but that is not why I'm here tonight. There is an African proverb that says that until lions tell their stories, tales of hunting will glorify the hunter. I'm here tonight to highlight that while the district partially responded, that this work was done by our Spanish-speaking families, facilitated by Catalina Contreras. They dreamt and sought ways to have their dreams realized and persevered, even when told no multiple times. These voices should be included and celebrated.
I'm sorry, your time is up.
I'm done.
Thank you.
Any
Any questions? No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are we done? Okay, it's not working at all now. Here. I'll scoot over here. So hearing no further comments, the public hearing is now closed. So now we will have the student investment account annual report. We're just making it. So the next item on our agenda is the presentation of the student investment account annual reports. With Olivia, are you Does anyone have questions for Olivia?
Hello.
So questions?
Yes. One of the things that are very valuable for the hearing is we get feedback from the community, and I know you had maybe less than 60 seconds to gather a response. Whether you have a general thoughts of what we heard from the hearing that you can share today, or in the coming weeks, if there's any feedback that we can learn from the themes that we heard through the hearing that just elapsed, if you would like to comment on that.
So themes from the public comment, is that what you're referring to? Right. I first want to say that I do recognize that how this happened. I sat in meetings with Sarah, and I know the story behind, and that story isn't in this writing, in the 300 words or less that we had to put together, and that is, it's just not there, and I know that. And I hear that, and it stings to know that and to realize that, and I apologize. I think the outcome is what's also really important, though, too, is that something changed in order to make sure that our families who are bicultural, bilingual, have someone to help them to navigate the IEP process. Special education, which is a mystery to even people with, who are English, first speakers and have, all the education in the world's beds, can still be incredibly complicated. So I appreciate SEAC and the role that they play in making sure that our families have a place where they can go to ask questions and have advocacy, and I am also very happy to have these navigators hired in order to help that process as well. Right now it's just elementary, but it's a start.
I would also add that we are beginning to engage with the integrated guidance implementation. That is that new initiative at the state level that includes the student investment account program. And so I think it's kind of tricky because this report is based on last year, and now we're sort of moving into this integrated guidance framework, and we'll be sort of combining 6 different programs, including the SIA grant, into that work. And so we are doing that annual engagement and plan review and everything. And so that work is actually going to be starting in the next couple of months. And so I think the feedback and the comments we received tonight can easily be incorporated into that process as well. And there will be more opportunity for our community to engage in the development of our plan moving forward. A much more comprehensive plan that will include the SIAA account, but also include 5 other programs, including our high school success, our CTE programming, our early indicator for intervention systems, Everyday Matters, which is our focus on attendance, and there's another one, but I can't think of it.
Continuous improvement plan.
Oh, yeah, the big one.
So just to also share, so when we're working on getting feedback around the board goals, we've also included questions around the integrated guidance. So when we're, those dates that we shared and the groups that we're meeting with, that's going to help you as you establish changes to your board goals, but it will also help us as we put this information together for the Department of Education and the funding associated with it. So I didn't share that earlier, and I recognize that that was an important component. So we're going to be getting feedback on both integrated guidance as well as board goals, because we'll have that opportunity for community engagement efforts.
So I have another question regarding to the SIA account. How much of the funds were investing from the SIA account that could have been invested through full funding of IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act? And the second question is, how much are we getting for IDEA? And if we get 40%, the full funding from the federal government, how much would that be?
I don't know that those are figures that Olivia is going to be able to pull
For
out
later. Yes.
Immediately.
Sorry.
Those are things that if the board in consensus wanted us to bring back and share, we're happy to do that. But I think that's a difficult question to answer on the fly.
I'm very sorry. I want to recognize that. Just want to say if there is a consensus by the board, I would encourage us to highlight that. Congresswoman Bonamici is considering a bill that will force Congress to fully fund 40% of IDEA funds, and I know we're intentional about the work, and if we can do it through the SIA account, we should, but also we need to highlight that we're spending money that should come from the federal government, and we're shortcoming, so if the chair indulges, maybe directing staff for that information.
I think because advocacy for our school district is an important role that we play, being able to speak to what we could do if IDEA was fully funded would be helpful. So if you can get us those numbers, I would appreciate it.
So on this thread, I have a couple questions here. First one is, considering the uncertainty of school funding in the upcoming legislative session, what are the likely impacts on district mental health and special education programs, and what are the impacts on students, is really what I want to get at.
Are you talking about if we were to propose a de-investing, or?
I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty about funding in this legislative cycle, and looking forward to a couple biennia, there are people that are expressing a lot of concern about reduction in funding. What does that mean for the school district, and what does that, more specifically, what does that mean for our kids? What impact would there be on kids?
We've just scratched the surface on having those conversations and haven't gotten that far yet. The pause in our hiring is kind of our first step in that, just to slow those processes down. But we haven't had any in-depth discussions around whether we would or would not continue investments in a lot of our newer established priorities. We haven't had those conversations.
Okay.
So I have a question about the report that's been shared with us. Is there opportunity to make changes to that report at this point in time, or is this sharing with the board sent off, being posted and put up immediately?
Are you talking about the responses to the questions?
The question responses that are in the board agenda?
The report is presented to the board, not for the board to adopt it. It's just an information item. The format of this report is a template that ODE provides to school districts, and so the only thing that in this report that is unique to us is just the response sections, and we're also limited in how many words we can use for each response.
Sure. And I think what I was trying to understand is, just in looking at the cover letter that goes along with this, the timing of the report being shared with the board before being submitted and put on the website. Is there still time in that window versus it's being shared just as sort of a matter of protocol?
This is being shared, and then we're required to submit the board minutes and the report to ODE by November 30th. That's an annual deadline. And so the response is just as it was written by district staff. If the board wants to provide feedback on that, that's great, and we could use that moving forward.
Okay. And is that an appropriate just comment to make now in terms of, I mean, not to open but this seems like the time.
Sure.
Just in thinking about and carrying forward the public comment that came forward and acknowledging stories and voices that weren't named or told, and in looking at the annual report, the question and the response, there are a couple of different questions that really stood out to me from what I heard earlier around what changes in behavior have you observed, and I think that's in there, then naming the relationship with SEAC. And I know, wording is tight and wording is small, and at the same time thinking about how those involved could be named. Or then there were also questions, let's see, later on there were two others that stood out to me around as you think about what guided your choices and prioritization efforts, a place potentially where other folks or stories could be named, and then also the question before that around SIA implementation includes ongoing engagement with all students, focal students, families, staff, and community partners. Have relationships with or between those groups changed and or been maintained throughout this academic year? And I know in working on reports like these, how tight word counts are, and thinking about how do we tell the real histories and the real struggles and challenges that come through that lead to real change happening, that this is an opportunity.
Yeah, something I do want to clarify, because it's not necessarily obvious, is that this report is in reference to how we utilize our student investment account grant. It's not like a encompassing district-wide. The responses were written in specific to this, the clearly identified strategies and investments that we used the grant funding on last year. And so we're really reporting on the activities from last year right now, which, so that the feedback we're getting today is great as we move forward, but this is really just more of like a summary and like, hey, here's an update on what we were up to last year and with regards to this grant.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
just
that first question that has the conversation about the navigators, bilingual, bicultural, like that didn't happen last year, that's happening this year.
Okay.
And that question was asking like what changes in behavior have you observed related to the implementation of what you did last year? So we were looking at last year and seeing gaps and holes and moving forward. So that's the other piece of it too.
And one other thing is that the minutes associated with this meeting are going to be included. And so the public testimony that we've heard related to this student investment account is also going to be included in that way as well.
Okay.
And there isn't like a word limit there. It's
Sure.
Other than it's just the minutes as Kim takes them.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for clarifying. It's helpful to understand that context.
The context,
too.
right.
Yeah.
So thank you for all your work. So the next item on our agenda is the student achievement update from Ryan.
On my side, I can see half a slide, and so it's making me think. Mine looks.
Good half. Looks good.
I'm going to stop sharing and try again. There we go. Still doing 2/3, which is going to be problematic as we have data to look at. So I'm wondering if we take a couple of minutes to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back together.
So we are in recess for 5 minutes, and we'll be back.
What's that? Well, I did
You're doing slides.
Google.
Oh, I was
The board is back in session. The next item on the agenda is a report on student achievement.
All right, that's perfect. So we can look at this.
I know, exactly.
So what we wanted to do tonight was really sort of take you through the process that you're going to be going through with our building principals as they talk about the work around their school improvement plan. And so for us, we wanted to share some areas of improvement that we're focusing on in the upcoming year related to district improvement. So we're going to share some information with you related to some data sets, some next steps that we're taking, as well as some of the components underneath sort of investments that we're making as we come out of the pandemic and we think about student achievement.
Okay.
All right, so there's going to be three sections. There's going to be where are we now, where are we going, and how do we want to get there? So going with the theme that we started the school year off with, which was around space, we've maintained that in our slide deck this year. When you see the slides from our high school principals, you will not see rockets. So just be anticipating that because they were not on board with the rockets like we were. So if you want to call that out, feel free. You can say, Mr. Boring, where are your rockets? Where are the rocket ships, Mr. Boring?
Yep.
All right. So who we are. So this was a picture of CSD staff at our welcome back this year. So as you can see, there's nearly 1,000 folks all here working in the community in support of students. So we take one of those every few years, and we take them as an intentional decision to think about who we are and how we represent the school district. We still may wear colors from our individual schools, but we're one district. And again, the theme this year was around the love of public education, and you can see I had a shirt that said that. So again, a great way to start off the year and who we are. 6,348 students. So these numbers that you're going to see, many of them were from last spring. As we report out, a lot of it has to do with assessment data that we have or have had, and when that came to us. So in terms of context, one of the things I want you to remember is that this was the end of last year, coming out of the pandemic, still working through masks, working through vaccine. So some of that is also attributed to this. At the same time, I think it's important contextually to think about the fact that we're coming out of a once-in-a-century pandemic, and we have work to do. We recognize that, we acknowledge it, and at the same time, we're taking steps to try to address what we know to be best practice in supporting students as we come out of the pandemic. All right, so this is who our students are. Anything you would want to add on this one relating to our emerging bilingual students?
I would say that, so 9% of our students have been identified as language learners or emerging bilinguals. We also have a larger population that you'll see later in the district that are called EVER-ELs, which just means are emerging bilinguals, and students that were formally identified as emerging bilinguals.
Here is the racial makeup of our staff and students. One of the things to note is that those are also self-identified, and sometimes people have identified themselves in more than one category, and so the percentage adds up beyond 100%, but we felt it was representative. And I like this graphic because it, again, highlights our desire to balance the students that we represent in our school district with the staff that we have. And so for me, I felt like this was a great way of representing that. And so to Lee and Lori Corvallis, who put this all together for us tonight, just to kind of to have appreciation for the way that they think about data, the way that they look at it, and how it helps us to be better. So we looked at a couple of things. We're going to talk about how our students experience school. And the way we often think about that at this point is with our youth truth data. And so our students are taking those surveys in the spring to talk about their experiences, and we're using that as we think about both the academics of our schools, but also the relational piece. And again, we're looking at areas that we're working towards improvement and growth on tonight. So we're going to highlight some areas that we have identified as a district that we need to work on. All right, so the first one is around relationships. And in Youth Truth, there's about 5 or 6 questions that fall into the category of relationships. Do you like the way that your teacher treats you when you need help? Does your teacher treat you with respect? How many of your teachers are willing to give extra help on schoolwork if you need it? How many of your teachers believe that you can get a good grade if you try? And when I'm feeling upset, stressed, or having problems, there's an adult from school who I can talk to about it. And so those are the questions that associate with relationship. And here's a couple of quotes from our students. Do you want to go ahead and cover those?
Sure. So the power that I see in Youth Truth is it gives us both quantitative and qualitative data. So whenever it works through, how would you rate on this so that we can really get holistic quantitative data, but we also ask, tell us what you're thinking and how you're feeling about this. So I will translate the one in the left corner. So the comment here says, my teacher helps me in math, and when I get it wrong, she tells me what I did wrong and helps me to get better in math. But we just pulled out a couple of comments from every level because it really puts the heart into the data and why we're doing this.
So then again, that's 3 through 5 last spring. Middle school, it's about 50%. And again, a couple of those quotes that, again, are confidential quotes that are added. One of them that is really strong is if you want to come out to your family but don't know how or don't think they'll accept you, you can talk to an adult at school about it, and they'll encourage you and give you the confidence boost you need to tell your family or friends that you aren't straight. And if no one accepts you, they do, and they may even talk to your parents or family about it, and that they should be proud or happy for you or something. So again, these are words straight from students and super powerful. At the same time, I just don't share my problems with anyone. And so we know that there is work to do here. And one of the things we're talking about is how do we continue to build those relationships with students and staff. At the high school, it was about 1/3 had a rating of 4 or 5. It's on a 1 to 5 scale, 3 being neutral. And then again, a couple of quotes. Try to actually get to know students and be vulnerable with them and ask questions. Care about students, not just teach them. I don't get cared enough at home, and it's the same with a lot of teachers at the school. And so that's a challenge for us as we think about moving forward. And at the same time, some ways my teachers care about me and help me are by greeting me every day and asking how I am or what I have been doing recently. They also always make sure I ask for help whenever I need it. So again, as we think about this and we think about our work moving forward, that's an area that we know we're going to continue to focus on. Another area that we're focusing on is attendance. So for us, regular attender is at 90%. At this point, 65% of our students are regular attenders, and so we know that focusing on attendance and being present and encouraging attendance is work that we have to do as well. Again, some of the things that I would say that have happened through the pandemic are also some patterns that we have to work with families to reestablish, and so that's another area that we're focusing on. Anything you'd want to add on that?
No, that's great.
All right. How are students doing? And so now we're going to focus a little bit on student achievement data. So this is for 9th grade, students receiving full credit in math as 9th graders. Again, for us, that's a really good indicator of student success. And we are at 81% for last year's 9th graders. Again, thinking about kids coming into now their 10th grade year, and what does that mean for students moving forward? We also look at it by student group, students navigating poverty, our emerging bilinguals, students that were ever supported through bilingual services, and students with disabilities. So again, an area that as we continue to work towards coming out of the pandemic, an area that we're focusing on. And again, as we get further into the presentation, we'll be sharing some of the steps that we're taking. Math proficiency in 3rd through 5th grade. We combine 3rd through 5th. And with this one, we are looking at SBAC from last spring. So again, coming out of the pandemic, the end of last year, the reason we chose this is because we'll have a comparator in this SBAC results this spring, and we'll be able to look at the progress that we've made there. And then we also looked at English language arts proficiency through 5th grade, and about half of our students met the standard there related to SBAC. Good night. What's that?
Do you want me to do this one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Another piece that we wanted to look at, one of the things that we acknowledge is that SBAC tells one story. It is pretty deaf to the fact that two out of our 8 elementary schools all of our students are learning to read in 2 languages. And so we really wanted to also keep at the center that we have a number of students that are learning to read in Spanish, and how is that going? So we looked at reading proficiency using our STAR assessment that we give all of our students. And we looked at our 2nd graders. So this is actually their reading proficiency and how they scored in the fall of this year. And we were intentional in saying reading proficiency, not English reading proficiency or Spanish reading proficiency. So at 2nd grade, our dual language students are primarily learning how to read in Spanish, so they were assessed in Spanish, and our English only schools were assessed in English. And we combined that data together.
Which was an important data set for us to combine.
Oh, sure. You're not in my brain. So green is proficient. Blue is on watch, meaning that they are very close to meeting that proficiency level, and we're keeping an eye on them. Yellow is considered intervention, and red is considered urgent intervention.
All right. And then we're following that up with where do we want to be? So establishing some of those goals for ourselves. And as we think about that, we also continue to think about our board goals. And so as we think about those, we think about student achievement, we think about health and wellness, we think about real world learning, facilities, and equitable systems. And I think that this is, again, representative of the fact that we place equity at the center of decision making, and also recognize that student achievement is impacted in a positive way by addressing barriers for students and barriers for families. And so that was important for us to highlight, again, going back to the work that you have continued to support over the last 7 years since those board goals have been established. So again, as we think about our academics, all students will be strategic readers and deep thinking mathematicians. And what that looks like to us, again, one of the things that we've looked at has been thinking about a 5-year pattern. So thinking about the fact that we're continuing to move out of the pandemic. And if we want to have 80% proficiency, we need to think about that and what does that look like year over year, and progress being made. So for us, as we think about 3rd through 5th grade proficiency in math, we're seeing our goal for this spring is 50%, which we know we have a ways to go by setting a goal there. but we also know that that's progress if we're moving towards those higher thresholds over time. Middle school, one of the things that we're thinking a lot about at middle school is conceptual understanding and procedural fluency. So again, beyond computation and being able to solve an algorithm, to be able to have a deeper understanding of mathematics. And so we've developed some local performance assessments that help us to look at that. And then at the high school, we showed you that graph related to freshmen, 1 credit as freshmen. We're looking at decreasing the gap between the proficient level for all students and our student groups. So we're looking at it differently because we know with that group of students, there's work to do to move us further to get all of our students on track. Also in English language arts, we're thinking both about OAKS and continuing growth there, but we're also thinking about that second grade proficiency. Really, it's about learning to read in second grade. So having that fluency for second graders, and we are have an investment there that we've been making, and so we want to be able to track that over time. And then the engagement and connection piece that we talked about, related primarily to attendance and youth truth. So increasing that regular attendance rate this year, as well as seeing higher relationship scores from youth truth at elementary, middle, and high. And again, those happen in the spring, and so we're working towards that throughout the school year.
Yeah?
All right, so how are we gonna get there? So a couple of things that I want to highlight for us. Thanks, Lee. One of the things I want to highlight is the fact that this work has been underway. So as we think about summer school as one example, a lot of these measures happened last spring. And so as you think about this school year, having served nearly 1,000 students in summer school was an intentional decision based on student need and invitation. And so that was, again, one of those first steps that we've been able to take post-pandemic to help to support students and increase student achievement. Kinder Academy is another example of that. The Kinder Academy has been a bit of a challenge because of all the construction happening around our community, if you hadn't noticed. But it's also will allow us to have greater access over time. So I see those as two broad interventions of support that we've been able to take since the pandemic. Also, principals are spending a great deal of time with this data. So we spent time in retreat at the end of July, and in those meetings, principals by grade level, by team, were looking at the same data related to their individual school scores and coming up with specific plans for their schools. And again, that's what you're going to start to see at our next meeting in November as schools are starting to share their SIP plans with you. So one of the goals that I have had for this year is greater assessment literacy by our school leaders, and that was the way that we primarily spent our retreat. Between that and our equity policy, those were the two things we really focused on. And again, so those schools setting goals, revising their goals, tracking their progress. So that's one of those pieces that we focused on. In math instruction, one of the things that we've done this year is we've brought on a teacher on special assignment who's really focused on supporting our math work beyond the algorithm to have a deeper understanding of math. And our elementary schools continue to work with a math consultant in a similar way. So we are providing professional development to teachers and staff in the moment and in the classroom. Shared expectations about use of curriculum. And so as we're doing learning walks, we're looking for the Bridges curriculum in math. How's that being utilized? How's Number Corner working in our elementary schools? There's intentionality there. Grade 6 through 10, we're in the process of a math adoption. Again, looking for materials that go deeper beyond solving an algorithm better understanding of what that means for me as a mathematician. Again, academic discourse and making sure that we're helping students to have ways to talk about math and ways to talk about that with peers. And also our leadership team this year, at each of our monthly meetings, we're spending time with Limitless Mind, the book that you read over the summer. So again, thinking about systems and structures and how those influence and impact outcomes for kids. And our math teachers as well. Yep. And reading, one of the things that we've done is we've made an investment in making sure that we have an additional adult in our K-1 classrooms. If you think about a district our size, that's about $1 million investment that we've made with those federal relief dollars over the last year and this year to make sure that we have additional adults and additional supports in classrooms. And I think that's a real key piece to the reading work that we have to do. And it also accounts for that K2, that second grade tracking that we're doing around STAR. One of the other things around reading that's happening is we are spending time with our curriculum program support folks. So as an example, with Collaborative Classroom, over this week, one of the trainers has been working with our principals, going through walkthroughs. In the past, they've modeled lessons for our teachers. And the same thing is going to be happening with Adelante, which is our dual language arts program. Again, thinking about how to make sure that we're providing ongoing professional development to our teachers related to reading and reading support. So as we recognize that we have challenges coming out of the pandemic, I also want you to hear that we have plans and that we're making progress and that we have areas that we're focused on and working towards. The same thing is true when we think about engagement. So that was the other area that we had highlighted as a goal area. Character strong at the middle school, greater fidelity there. High school, the focus on attendance and making sure that if a student doesn't have a trusted adult, how do we make that connection and help them to have that connection with an adult in their school? And one other thing that I talked about earlier tonight, or just briefly talked about with our work around board goals and meeting with groups of community members, one of the things that we'll start next month is we're going to convene a group that has been focused on our equity work. One of the things that I've learned and I've recognized is that there are so many great things that are happening, and there's folks that feel in some ways isolated, that they're doing this work alone. And so for us to bring together representatives from our executive team, our equity coordinator in Marcianne, members of SEAC who spoke tonight, our TDAC, the theater group, who's looking at equity in theater production, an equity TOSA, our mental health staff, our family support, a school principal, a secondary safe student representative, a DLI staff, a board member, community members, including NAACP and Casa Latinos Unidos. I think as we think about that as a collective impact model, I think that there's value in that. And so to me, thinking about hearing all those voices and perspectives in one place and sharing out what work is happening will help us to feel and recognize the work that is happening, and also for resources to be shared and understood in a different way. And so that's another area that I think really focuses on the second goal around strategies of engagement. So those are some of the activities and actions that we're taking this year. Again, recognizing there's work ahead of us, and also understanding that we have the people, we have the community support, and so we just need to continue to move forward and do the right work. So that is what I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to see. And always the celebration in K-12 is the graduations that you've been able to be a part of. And we have work to do to make sure all of our kids are there with smiling faces and feeling like they're prepared for the next stage of their lives. So we wanted to share that with you. Again, appreciation to Melissa and the Growth and Experience team, to Lee and Lori for putting these materials together for us. And I want to open it up to questions. But again, I wanted us to be thinking about this in terms of a practice for all of us as we get ready to meet with our principals later this month. Again, they will have a similar format. They'll have a similar flow in the information that you have in front of you, but ideally you'll have had time to think about it and to dig through it before those conversations happen. So I recognize tonight I'm not giving you that same period of time, that length to really think about this and delve into it, but I also wanted to make sure to get it to you ahead of them.
Okay, well, I was just worried that I know our student reps may at some point leave us, and I'm really interested in hearing their comments or their questions or thoughts around, seeing some of the data that you saw around students and their feelings about relationships at school or academics. Do you have thoughts about what's most needed?
Yeah, so actually at our SAFE meeting today, we had one today, CV, Shuttleton, and Franklin students got together, and we actually talked about representation in our schools, and especially in the staff, and how kind of at CV, we don't have a lot of staff of color, and so we, as SAFE students, don't always feel like we are represented within our staff, and that kind of goes along with how some students might not have someone that they can talk to about problems and that one question on the Youth Truth Survey.
Yeah.
I would like to celebrate our new counselor. I met him today, and he is really cool. He is Black, so it was really cool to talk to him, and he is my counselor, which is pretty cool. But I think keeping that in mind when you're hiring, that hiring people of color is it's really impactful for students, and it can be hard, I'm sure, to find people of color who are willing to reside in Corvallis since we are pretty white. But just keeping that in mind is kind of a comment that I had. And then also, I was hoping, Ryan, maybe that we could, I don't know if this is data that you have, if you could give me a breakdown of CV, like, because earlier in the slideshow you had like students to staff race percentage.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had that for CV.
I don't have it in the slide deck,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we can definitely put that
Get
together.
ready for December, because CV will be presenting in December, and they will have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to go with your question?
Okay, so my question was about the math percentages, specifically about elementary. So I was wondering if non-English speakers received any sort of help or specific help, I guess, speaking from experience. When I moved here, I was in the English language program, and when we did the initial STAR testing, like I was below average in everything, and that doesn't reflect how I'm a student right now, right?
Totally.
So, no Excel, so it was, and like when I was doing math, I didn't receive any sort of extra help, or like no teacher really focused with me. It was more like self-learning and figuring that out on my own, or with my family who had also moved, and we were struggling, just as immigrants. So if they're getting any sort of accommodation, if that's getting looked into, because I think that really impacts students, and there's a very big difference for,
Yeah, that is a great question. So with both STAR and Smarter Balanced, there are kind of guidelines around acceptable accommodations. So I can speak a little bit to the accommodations that are, or designated supports available to language learners, specifically on SBAC. A lot of it is centered around, they have more supports for native Spanish speakers, and that I think comes from just the population. So that assessment actually can be presented as a side-by-side stacked assessment, where there is Spanish language and there is English. And so students can toggle back and forth, and they can answer in either language. So that is a designated support based on if teachers determine that's something that would support a child, then that would be the support they would receive during that. There are some other accommodations, but that's the one that I find most obviously benefiting our language learners.
Yeah, so I had another question about specifically the objective about math, and specifically like the middle school, and how you were going to look at the 7th grade population and like consider local performance assessment. I was just unclear of exactly what that was.
Is that mine? I can totally do this one.
Okay.
So local performance assessments, it's just a term used that we, when we design assessments that we administer across a grade level or across a team, and teachers have worked together to develop those assessments. So there are a number of different things, but what they often look like, rather than a number of problems, it's actually a complex problem, and there's a rubric that we use to score that, to look at their conceptual understanding. Not only did they get the answer right, so it's not so much a long list of problems to do, but it's representative problems of key learning in the grade level. So if, dividing fractions is, I think, a 6th grade standard, that's a big standard. Well, students could do a whole list of those. Or what we do is we ask them, okay, show us that you know how to do this, and also explain your thinking and what you're doing, and model this out, demonstrate with a picture of how this is what you're doing, and show us, write a problem that you would represent this as a story problem, and then we use a rubric to score that.
Okay, I had one more question about just standardized testing and STARS. So I was wondering if students are getting practice or also assessments of other forms, like other than standardized testing, since it's a very specific sort of assessment, and some students don't perform well in that sort of assessment. And also if before doing OAKS and STARS, if they're getting practice in that, because if you maybe learn something in a certain way and then you get a test that maybe it's not how you were learning, maybe a student wouldn't perform as well in that. So that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so I'll take the first half, you take the second half. So that's another great question. I recognize that these standardized assessments are not the be-all, end-all. I think that there's better ways that we assess and to check on kids' knowledge or students' knowledge throughout a course. For us, what we look at it as helps us to see kind of broadly the whole district, more so once a year, rather than all the things that are happening in a classroom with your teacher based on the test that you're taking. Even teachers coming together who've given the same test and talk about how it went for them as a teacher versus another teacher, how their students have done on it. So there's a lot of assessments that happen outside of these, but as we think about how information gets reported out about schools and school districts, this is often the data that gets put in the paper in other places, and so oftentimes we feel like we need to respond to that and that narrative in the community, while we also recognize that the most important assessments are the ones you're taking in classrooms with your teachers that help them to know what you need next as learners. This is for us more of a kind of after the fact kind of an assessment. It doesn't do the same thing that you're talking about, and I recognize that there's greater value in the ones you're talking about.
Yeah, I would reiterate the same thing. Whenever we're talking with teachers, we're telling them, you know what, don't take time to look at Smarter Balance. Look at the assessments you're giving in the classroom, because it's going to tell you about what to do next and where to go next. And this is really about the power of SBAC comes from taking, thousands of scores and putting them together to look at trends, but looking at individual student scores is not that valuable. Students do have the opportunity to practice with STAR. We actually use that assessment 2nd through 8th grade, and it's done actually in their classroom on their iPads or their Chromebooks, and teachers have access to those resources throughout the year, so they can use them a number of times. We, as a district, have a couple of times where we say, oh, you have to give the assessment right here, because we want to make sure everyone's taking it, but they have access to that throughout the year. And the practice assessments, for SBAC are online and available. Even at home, you can take them, just for fun.
Yeah, those were great questions, and
Yes,
I really
I would
appreciate
like,
that.
I'd like to recognize the great questions that you asked. They were pretty hard. I could see these two sweating. So way to go.
And we're done answering questions now.
I thought the highlight of my evening was going to be getting a teaching and learning report from my superintendent, which I think is really cool because you don't see that very often. But I think the highlight, and I think Director Alabdoa and myself are in consensus that the highlight of our day and perhaps week was watching our students and staff nerd out on assessment literacy. It was just fabulous. So thank you for that. I yield back.
Yeah, that was incredible, and thank you, because I think about like 90%. That was. I just wanted to know when we get this information, another viewing of it, if we will have the opportunity to see in your breakdown of who's in the green, who's in the blue, if there will be an opportunity to disaggregate that by race and ethnicity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically that comes in my evaluation report. Good night. And we had a lot of conversation about that, and we know that that's an expectation that you have of us. And at the same time, we were trying to be more broad as we think about district improvement. And at the same time, I don't want it in any way to represent the fact that we don't think that looking at disaggregated data is valuable and primary importance.
Really, they asked all the questions I thought of, and even deeper. It was phenomenal, really.
When you live it, right? So
yeah,
you've lived it for 13 years. There's a level of depth of knowledge that comes from being a student in a K-12 system that has probably, when they started, we were in NCLB, and all the things that have changed over time. And they can also identify the fact that a high stakes assessment and where that kind of falls in their own learning. So I think that they have a valuable perspective that none of us have, because that's been their experience, right?
Agreed, 100%, no doubt. And it's just, they're the experts. They are the experts. And I look forward to co-present with you in about a week about this, and maybe capture this moment and the questions that they had. It's really a fundamental step in how we analyze the data and move forward. One thing, real quick, I want to highlight, I don't know what the recommendations of the Senate bill will be about the standards and math, and whether they're changing ninth grade algebra requirements, which I think is important. But one thing you highlighted really well here is the delineation between why we teach algebra or math. There is two ways. One way is we teach the kids about algorithms, and they apply algorithms to solve problems, and we thought they're good to go. And what we're doing, and what I'm hearing from the expectations we're developing all the way from third grade and above, or throughout the process, is that we teach them to develop or discover algorithms on daily basis in order to understand how to solve a problem and then solve it. And that is also algebra. So I just want to highlight that we need to navigate whatever changes might happen to us and not lose the essence of why algebra in ninth grade was there originally, is to teach how to solve a problem and how to develop an algorithm, not necessarily teaching how to follow algorithms. And I see that in what you're developing and what you're doing.
Yeah, that's ideally that's what we're going for students to be able to solve an equation, understand why they're using the equation, be able to describe not just the purpose behind it, but also explain problems in multiple ways. That's when we think about learning math in a deep way. Those are the kinds of things we're thinking about. You know, we're still our goal is still that students are able to be successful in algebra in 8th grade. So that's still the focus for us. I heard you, you mentioned 9th grade, and I just want to make sure that, that's okay, but just in our community and with the conversations we've had, it really ideally we're trying to help students to be successful in algebra in 8th grade.
8th grade, thanks.
Yep.
Unless. So it's just the one topic that didn't come up. Thank you for this lovely snapshot, nice broad overview, nice graphics, really enjoyed all of it. Oh, I have to put another plug in. You know that the daisy diagram that is overused by everybody and used badly? For once, you guys, we got it right.
Thank you, Lori
Did you
Corvallis.
see the people turning heads and looking at each other going, oh my God, aha moment. So amazing use of that with our goals. It was like, what a great way to represent that. But that's not what I want to talk about. So 2 years ago was a hot mess. Last year was really hard. We just saw an article in the Oregonian about SBAC. Our community quietly had a conversation where we got a little hysterical about scores. I'm not overly concerned about where our kids are at. Our kids are where they're supposed to be. I'm more concerned about growth. And so definitely need to be looking at data over time. There was once upon a time this board tried to learn about, what is it, growth percentiles? And it didn't really stick really well. We don't have to do that, but some way for us to, Lee is taking the bait. She's like, I'm going to teach it to you. Yes, but I mean, this board, I'm really interested in what does our growth look like over time.
And that's one thing that I have enjoyed too, is looking at a 4-quadrant model that talks about achievement and growth, and comparing student growth and student achievement, and how those two things, and where our students are in percentages in each one of those quadrants.
That would be really cool.
And that's been something that our principals have had access to, because I agree with you, it's the growth component. And actually, as I've been meeting with elementary principals, and they've been setting their student learning and growth goals for the year, for our evaluation between them and myself, they've been having a lot of conversations around those growth percentages as well as those having met percentages.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been it's been another great tool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lee.
So awesome. And I guess I'll editorialize and say, I think at this point, having been on the school board for almost 10 years, I think SBAC, Oaks back in the day, it's just a cruel, cruel device. I'm much more interested in STAR data for looking at a system. I think that's a lot more useful. And I would love it if we just did away from big, long, summative assessments that are just painful for kids.
So here's the dilemma that comes with that we grappled with. So we recognize the amount of time students spend in assessment. And so ideally, we would have looked at fall and spring related to STAR.
Right.
But we know that in spring, we have to give SBAC, and in giving SBAC, we know that there's less time to give STAR. And so if we're thinking about STAR, we're really thinking fall to fall, other than second grade, because they're not taking SBAC yet. So that's why we're using that in this presentation. But I don't think anyone would disagree with that assessment.
Okay. I was just editorializing.
I can tell you.
I followed up on it.
Yeah. And the assessment blueprints for the SBAC have gotten significantly shorter this year, so maybe we'll see some changes.
That would be really nice. I yield back, I'm sorry.
No, I think this is right up this board's alley. And I'm really grateful we have students who can ask really thoughtful, great questions. And one of their questions, and we'll see this data for each school, but every time we put up our data on staff diversity and student diversity, I feel like we're kind of we're not really patting ourselves on the back, but what we're seeing is a little false because it's weighted so heavily by the dual language program, whereas there's some students who see more diversity than others.
Are you talking about staffing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I just, whenever we present that, I think, yeah, but that's not across our school district. It's really, some of that is only seen by a small number of students. So I just think we need to really be careful as we look at those numbers to really think about what that represents in our classrooms.
I agree, and I also think that when we look at what's happening right now, the students who need to see staff of color the most are seeing those staff of color in their building. I think about students at Garfield and how important that is for them. So trying to look at it from the other side.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that also, but there are other students who don't see it at all. And the other thing, we talked some about math, but I was thinking about, as I was reading, actually through the student investment account report, I was thinking about the adoption we did of the language arts curriculum a couple of years ago, the collaborative classroom. And I think one of the questions that I had at the time was, does this have a component that's really looking at explicitly teaching how to decode language? Are we looking at phonomics and phonemes and really teaching children how to decode language? Yeah. And so as I was hearing you talk about your professional development that's happening with that, I was wondering like how we're leveraging that really to boost those students who you have either, because they weren't in a classroom for a year and then had whatever disruptions happened last year, missed some of that really explicit teaching of reading, or who were already students who had some challenges with reading and now are trying to catch up again.
Yeah, and so that's actually a piece that this week when I did a walkthrough with that team that they're talking about is word work that students continue to do through elementary school, some working around multisyllabic words and diphthongs and some of those pieces of reading. And so they are working on the 3, 4, 5 component of that, recognizing some of the work that students have to do around phonemic awareness and phonics coming out of the pandemic. So that's a piece that is being added to collaborative classroom in response to what's gone on. No more questions.
We'll get a chance with the SIP some too to talk about some of these things.
And again, I will be quiet after this, but this is kind of a trial run for the kinds of conversations I think you should look forward to in having with our principals during those SIP dinners.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so now we are moving on to our enrollment update.
Hi. So there is a narrative report that's part of the agenda tonight. There's a couple of charts within it, but I just wanted to go through some more detailed numbers with you. And so I'll go through these pretty quick, and then if you have any questions along the way, just let me know. So just looking at our overall enrollment, this was included in the document that was in the board packet, but you can see this is a snapshot of our enrollment over the last 10 years. This does exclude the Yes House Alternative School. That school closed a couple of years ago, so we didn't really want to skew any of the numbers. So this includes all of our district schools and Muddy Creek Charter School. And so you can see over the last 10-year period, our enrollment hasn't changed that much. It's only gone down by 0.7%. But we've definitely seen a pretty significant decrease over the last 5 years in that our enrollments decreased by over 7%. So our preliminary head count as of October 1 of this year was 6,355 students. The way this looks by grade, so that same 6,355 students, you can see there's different colors of the bars in this chart, and that's really just to call out the fact that we have a handful of grades that have a class of more than 500 students, and we also have a handful of grades that have a class of less than 500 students, and it is very split in that our larger classes are all in our higher grades at this point, and our small classes are all at our primary grades for the most part. Our kindergarten class of 396, the first class we've had below 400 in quite some time. And you can see that we have like a large 6th grade class this year. But we've talked about this a little bit a couple of years ago with Linus Pauling enrollment and our middle school numbers. In a couple of years, our middle school numbers will start to look quite a bit different. The enrollment that we projected and the enrollment that we actually recorded, you can see the difference here. So we projected to have 6,439 students. We actually had 6,355. At the elementary level, the numbers weren't off by very much. We saw a pretty big change at 6th grade. Normally, historically, we've seen an uptick in our 6th grade class when we compare it to the prior year's 5th grade class. So we usually see upticks at 6th grade, 9th grade, and usually 12th grade in our district. We have a lot of students that enter our system at those grade levels, like they might be coming into our system at 6th grade for the first time, and maybe they were homeschooled before, or they went to a private school, and the same thing happens at high school as well. So our 6th grade number is a little off, and our 12th grade number is a little off. We still saw increases in our 12th grade class, just not as much as we normally would see. So as we move forward in our enrollment projections, when we look at our average cohort survival ratios, what we're experiencing this year will start to impact our projections moving forward, because we probably won't assume such a big increase at those entry points in our system. And so kind of diving deeper at our grade levels, looking at our elementary numbers by grade, looking at what that was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and what it is this year. So you can see, obviously, with our kindergarten, that looks quite different. And in fact, that looks the same for all of our grade levels, K-5. What I want to highlight is when we look at this same information, oh, sorry, I'm skipping through. I thought I had one for secondary. I don't see it. What I would say is that that looks different for grades 6 through 12. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, this year, the numbers are much more static. We don't see fluctuations up and down like we do at K-5. So, I would say that we're seeing a big change and adjustment is at that K-5 level. At 6 through 12, it won't start to impact those levels for a couple more years. And again, I think a lot of that will depend on keeping track of our survival ratios over time, because what we experienced this year was a little different. So that'll probably start to play into some of our future numbers as well.
Do you want to talk about birth rates as well?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you just knowing that when we project our kindergarten class sizes, we look at the birth rate statistics. We look at them as a state number. We look at county numbers. We look at specific zip codes. And everything over the next couple of years is not an indicator of any increase in kindergarten enrollments. In fact, it'll probably go down next year. But maybe 5 years from now, we might start to see that change again. I think last calendar year was the first year in many years where the state actually had an increase in live births. But for the 5 years prior to that, it was a constant decrease. And so we fully expect our kindergarten class next year to be like in the mid 300s. And so again, that K-5 level is where we're really focusing our attention when it comes to enrollment, because our secondary projections don't necessarily indicate big changes in the next couple of years, but at the K-5 level, it will have a significant impact, especially when we look at school by school, which is what I have up now. So it's kind of a weird, our high so much larger, but this is the numbers by school, and I'll just go to this next. Here's projected versus actual by school. So again, it's different everywhere. Bessie Coleman Elementary was a school where we added a teacher or added an additional staffing allocation in August because we anticipated those numbers looking different. But you can see across the board, these aren't huge numbers. When we look at it by school, though, you can see with some of our elementary schools, they've changed dramatically compared to 5 years ago and 10 years ago. So Catherine Jones Harrison and Mountain View Elementary have below 300 students now. Mountain View is a little tricky because it fluctuates quite a bit, but for some of our schools, they're been in a pretty constant decline. And so you can see like Adams is interesting, 10 years ago at 354, 5 years ago at 442, and now they're at 384. So I think in some of our elementary schools, they were really getting really big and really packed and really tight. And so there's definitely some more breathing room in some of our elementary schools, but the flip side of that is some of the numbers are pretty low. Okay, last slide. Take this with a grain of salt. These are very high-level numbers, very high-level calculations. This is just looking at our total enrollment as of October 1 and the classroom FTE allocations that we provide to each school. You could see, again, at the elementary level, Bessie Coleman is a little bit higher. Their actual enrollment was higher than projected. But you can see it's fairly static across the board. I did include Muddy Creek in this number. Their enrollment was also a little bit lower than projected, and they just have a static 6-section class, so that one's pretty straightforward.
One of the narratives that sometimes goes with declining enrollment is coming out of the pandemic and more families leaving K-12. But one of the things that I think you can see is that the number coming in is the area that we're most concerned about in terms of shrinking. And I think that has more to do, from my perspective, with the availability of affordable housing for families. And I think we'll continue to see that for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, the correlation is that the tax base in our area has increased, the number of units have increased, and so there's no evidence for us to correlate increase in housing units to any sort of increase in enrollment. I know in some other school districts, they develop a calculation for that. For every X number of housing units that are created, they anticipate a certain number of students coming in. So for us, we don't even assume an additional housing unit is going to produce a school-age student.
So does that suggest that that has more to do with the type of housing that we're building rather than, because if I go up to, for example, a good example is the Banks School District, small community, but with lots of housing growth, and they're anticipating very rapid growth in students, but they're producing homes that are aligned with that market. They're a bedroom community in Portland.
I think you can look at our neighbor district, Philomath, and see what they've experienced in the last 10 years. because they have had a lot of housing units added in that district, and it would correlate to their increase in enrollment. And it being right next to us, you can also differentiate the cost difference, and a lot of families choosing to maybe just live 5 miles out of town because it is more affordable to purchase a home. I would say overall, the market is so squashed right now that if there were affordable housing units that opened up in Corvallis, it doesn't mean more students. It just means people are going to be shifting between maybe a situation they're in into that. But the rental market is one that doesn't allude to more students either. So I think it's just a big squeeze. And I think in our area, that's nothing new, but it's been exacerbated in the last couple of years.
I also think in the Banks example, you're thinking about people who've moved out to Hillsborough and now are moving out to Banks. So I think that's a different situation as well.
Yeah, the dynamic.
So on that note, thank you. Really appreciate the slides, and if possible, we can have them available at the packets. That would be great. I think it's just appalling. In 2017, when we saw this going down, I still remember vividly during a hearing about about development, a person said, "Our schools cannot accommodate the kids, so we should not build more of the housing," and that was affordable housing development. I interjected then, and I think we need to speak up right now as loud as possible. We have great schools and high quality schools, but they should be accessible for the children and the families that they want to live here. And I would encourage us to really be more advocating for affordable housing and do everything we can with our city and county partners and local businesses as well to make sure people can stay here.
I did ask how many students in our enrollment count were out-of-district students, and the number is 254. So we have 254 students attending our schools that don't live in our district boundary.
Vice versa, how many students, do we have the number of how many students outside the district?
We don't have quite the easiest access to that. It's a lot easier for us to see what's in our system. It would require quite a bit of time for us to dig that up.
Don't worry about it. Thanks.
So this is, I mean, it's disquieting data, and what I always go back to, what's going to be the impact on kiddos? At what point does our declining enrollment start to reduce our funding such that it's pushing into programmatic impacts? And so I guess at what point are you going to get concerned? Because you're pretty stuck right now, but it's like.
Well, I'd say a lot of the allocations we provide to our schools are formulaic. And so if an elementary school, if we project that an elementary school will have less students next year than what they currently have, the first thing we look at is our class size targets and whether we're going to make any modifications to that number. And then we just calculate how many classroom teachers that school will have. And we'll have a lot of elementary schools next year that are going to have less classroom teachers than they have had in the past because of the declining enrollment. I think what gives me more pause is when we have small schools that have less than 300 students, create an operational issue in that, we kind of have what we call that basic school budget. Every school needs this, and this. But when a school gets really small, it's much less efficient. It's more costly. And so I think those are some of more of the concerns that I have, is that we sort of create like a baseline across the board for schools. But when you're serving 250 students and we want to have like a full-time counselor, a full-time, it becomes, not only does it become quite disproportionate between our schools, but it's also, pretty expensive. So we'll probably start to look at ways that we can start to share staffing amongst schools, which we already do now, but it might require some shifting. I'm not going to talk about boundaries or closing schools or anything like
I
that.
well, that's what was in my head, and I wasn't going to say it out loud, but I mean, that's where I'm going, where this conversation leads next. And I don't think the board needs to have that conversation now. We're not there. But 5 years from now, I mean, if the data stays the same, we may be getting there.
I think all eyes should be on Mountain View over the next couple of years. Fluctuates a lot, looks different every year. Most challenging elementary school to predict enrollment for. Also in an area where there's a lot of growth, so somewhat unpredictable in terms of what that will look like over the next 5 years. I gotta have to get my crystal ball out for that one.
Have to do with the long-term projections, but may you clarify this a little bit in your presentation, because you said the numbers at like 11th and 12th grade didn't decrease, but they were just lower than they went up less than we expected them to, I guess is the answer. And you had 6th grade that happened. So those were also places that you said we usually see students coming in. And I was wondering, are those students just not there? Or are students choosing to go somewhere else other than come to the Corvallis School District?
It could be all of those things. And that's hard. When I look at our 6th graders this year at 531, our 5th graders last year were 535. So I'm sure there's movement in and out both ways, but overall that cohort didn't change much. And historically we see it go up. Last year's 11th grade class was 535 students. This year's 571. It went up. It just didn't go up as much as it normally has for us. And so, again, it will help us to make better predictions in the future by including this year's actual results in our formulas.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are we good? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gives us a lot to think about. The next item on the agenda is consolidated action. As a reminder, the items under this portion of the agenda are for action. Does anyone have a question about anything in consolidated action? Does anyone wish to make a motion?
Madam Chair,
Yep.
I move that the board approve consolidated action.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Vince and seconded by Therese that we approve the items in consolidated action. Director Tomini?
Aye.
Director Jones?
Aye.
Director Al-Abdaba?
Aye.
Director Adams?
Aye.
Director Baker?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Passes unanimously.
Madam Chair?
Yep.
Just want to acknowledge, if possible, the applicants to the Budget Committee, thanking them for applying, and just to highlight the number of applicants is more than the vacancies, and so many qualified folks who haven't been appointed just because it's scarce. So to encourage them to apply and the future, and maybe run in the future for school board as well, and grateful for them applying.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think that's the first time we've had more applicants than we had spots in a long time, so that was really nice to see that engagement and interest.
Yeah, for a couple of years.
Yeah, it's been several rounds where, yeah. So we're moving on to consolidated information. As a reminder, the items under this portion of the agenda are for discussion. Would anyone like to discuss an item in consolidated information? Vince?
I would like Melissa to explain policy JECB and what is that? What does that wording mean? I felt really dumb reading that. I'm sorry. Maybe I was just tired. JECB, it's the one on transfers.
Do you want me to do that now, Sarah, or did you want, okay. So what we're asking for in a change to the policy is to add for priority in non-resident transfers, students who have attended a CSD school previously following a change of address. So what happens is in our policy, if a student is living in the Corvallis boundary and attending a Corvallis school, if mid-year they move out of boundary, they are allowed to remain with us until the end of the school year and finish their school year. When they're out of boundary, though, then they have to apply for a non-resident transfer to come back. And what we're asking is, can we put them a priority underneath siblings so that they can get back into the school where they have been attending?
See, that makes total sense to
Thank
me.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? There's Sammy.
On a different item, non-licensed personnel information, and with recognition that we can't speak specifically about specific personnel, I'm just wondering if Ryan and staff, whether today or later on, can give us highlights of what can we do to maintain the retention, or to maintain the retention of our EAs. I see a huge turnover. And I'm wondering if there is any insights about what we're doing and what could we do.
My initial response is that we've just completed a collective bargaining agreement that increases wages for our classified staff. So I think that that's an important piece in that conversation for us to have.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to board member comments. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share? Therese?
Just wanted to give a thank you to the staff that worked so hard to get conferences off last week. I had not done a middle school conference before, so it was a little bit different style, but I saw a lot of really engaged staff working really hard. Connect with parents, and I'm really appreciative of that. And I only obviously attended Linus Pauling, but my sense is that having been through Garfield as well, that that is a consistent experience, that our staff work really hard to be able to talk about our children and know them, know their names, and be able to say specific things about how they're doing. And I really appreciated the discussion this evening about assessment, being able to link that to the conversations that I had with teachers at the conference. It's very clear to me that the application of assessments in the classroom is something that teachers are working really hard to find ways to do with our students in creative ways as well. And so I can honestly say that retrospectively, I enjoy the conference even more now that I've been able to hear about, some of the thinking behind the assessment. So it's really just an encouragement to our staff to keep doing what you're doing, and to parents to make sure that they attend to those things and reach out and ask their questions if they have them.
Two comments. One is on the upcoming SIPS dinner. I'm sorry that I will be out of town for the first one, and so I'm very disappointed because it is a very rewarding conversation, and it's a rare exercise among school districts to allow board members to have very deep and substantive conversations with building administrators, and it's a wonderful way for school board members to learn more about how administrators think about their schools, and just enrich their own understanding of how education gets deployed. I know that I have found them very, very useful, and they have helped me immensely. So very high value experience. So thank you for continuing to do that and allow that. The other thing I want to speak to is over the last few meetings, this board has had people sharing their thoughts in fairly grumpy tones. And I'm just struck. Maybe other board members' experiences have been different, but I haven't heard from any of these people directly. I mean, we get emails, but I just want to remind members of the community that every person on this board is available to you. You are your elected officials. You can reach out to us and give us a phone call. You can email us directly. You can go get a cup of coffee with us, and we're here for you. And I would just ask that you do that before you come and growl at us in a public meeting. So I'll yield back. Thank you.
I just want to comment about the student investment account report. I'm glad that we got the full story into the minutes because that will be included in the report, and I think that's a story that needs to be acknowledged. But outside of that, I found, even those little brief descriptions, I found it very encouraging that what we were doing as a district was listening to stories and listening to the voices of our families and our students and our staff, and then using those stories and very conscious efforts to understand the data to improve as a district. And I just felt like that showed, a real consciousness of the people that we're impacting every day in our district, and a real deep desire to understand what's happening using things that we can measure and do that in a way we can understand. So very brief report, but I totally appreciate the work that went into that. I'm glad we have a way to tell the whole story, but there was a lot in that I kind of felt good reading, so thank you.
One other thing, that just so you know, that we have a resource. Kim reached out to OSBA to get the one-pagers around Get On Board, information about running for school board. It's a back and front. She has some of that are here, so if you want to take a few of those with you to share with other people who may be interested in running for the board in the future, we have those, and we'll also have them available other places in our community. So again, just to encourage participation.
So when we had our folks here giving public comment about the student investment account, I just wanted to note that what I think I was really hearing from them was that there continues to be a group of voices that just feel like they have to work harder to get represented. And I think there was some discouragement that even after all of that work didn't get recognized in our formal report. And so I understand that with 300 words, I mean, I can't do anything in 300 words, so I totally get that. That's hard. It gives me pause to say, when we know that we have such limited space, have we thought about how we're making choices about what to include? And have we considered how our biases might inform what rises to the top when we have such a small space? And so I definitely want to be clear that I don't think there was any intentional omission of anything. I think you don't have very much space and there's a lot to tell. But I wonder about an opportunity for us to engage maybe even some members who worked on that effort in our community to help us think about how we are selecting what stands out. Because I certainly know that I am more drawn to data, I'm more drawn to stories that I can personally connect with. And that's my bias, right? Like, they make sense to me, so I may focus on them more. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I didn't make it at the time because I wanted to keep us moving forward, but I do want to end by making sure that I think as a board, we are acknowledging that we definitely heard our community on this, and we definitely strive to be a board that elevates voices. And if we didn't get that right as a district, we need that feedback, and so thank you for bringing it. And now what we need is to figure out how we can do it differently in the future, because hopefully we're going to continue to have narratives that are different than what's reflected in the leadership and in the individuals sitting up here. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, anything else?